Hello and welcome to my CORELDRAW tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at setting up your workspace for creating a business card for print. So once you've launched Corel, you have to click New Document, and you want to set up your parameters here. This is based upon the type of card you're designing. Some cards are bigger than others. Square, rectangle. Is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Does it have round corners or not? That'll affect your printer. The company you use to print will determine what this measurement is. So if you're doing a regular horizontal business card that's 3.5 by 2 when you hold it in your hand, it's actually 3.6 by 2.1 or possibly 3.625 by 125. Depends again on the company you use and how much extra they need. That's if you see the terms bleed, what that is the distance from the edge of the actual physical card to the where it gets cut off after it's printed. So they print it first and then they cut it down to size. And there's a difference there. So the design file is actually bigger than the business card that gets handed out to your customer. So they print it, they cut it down to size, and that's the final business card. So it's printed at 3.6, it gets cut down to 3.5. So when you see the term bleed, that's what we're talking about. We need to make sure that our actual design file is larger and is the correct size for the printing, and that the printer will actually cut it down. Printing color mode is CMYK, and in this case it's 350 dpi. So when you first set up a business card, you've got your basic workspace, and as you can see it's in inches like I had the dialogue at the beginning, and then here's the size, 3.6 by 2.1. The first thing I like to do is set up a basic background for the whole thing, and in this case I want to make sure that my lock ratio is unlocked so I can change these two figures manually. I'm just going to type them in as opposed to manually dragging them around because it's just a lot faster to do that. And if I'm not sure if it's centered or not, I can hit P on the keyboard and that makes sure that the object is centered in the workspace. I'm also going to change the color to a gray, so I right click on the color, and that way when I send a proof to the client they'll be able to see what the card looks like for the most part. Now the other thing, because as I mentioned you do have the bleed, that means that this measurement is 3.6, where your actual card is, the card that gets handed out is going to be 3.5 by 2, right, as we mentioned, and I hit P again to center it. So really the card that you're designing is in here, but this gap is the bleed. So if you want, you can actually set up this extra object as a guideline. The other is you can actually use guidelines for that. So let me show you both ways to do that. So I'm going to go to my object manager and I have both objects on here. Now if I start messing around with my design, I'm going to very potentially screw this one up. So what I want to do is create a new layer, and you can call it nothing or call it anything, doesn't matter. And I'm going to drag this up to that layer. I'm going to change the color to something so I know that it's not actually my design, but that it is, in fact, a guideline. And then I want to make it so that I can still see it. I don't want it to print when I actually export the file, because it'll end up being on the design that I submit for printing. And I'm going to lock this layer. And so what that means is anytime I click or do anything, I'm actually not able to edit this layer. I'm only editing the layer below it. The thing is, it's now in the way. So if I wanted to put a, say I want to do a top border, right, it's telling me that there's a problem, it's locked. And that's because right now I have this still selected. So I click here, now I can drag this on, and let's say I want to fill it with red, something like that, and get rid of the border. So I'm going to right click in the X here to get rid of the border. So when I'm messing with this design, you can see that the pink is still in there. And if I were to try to take a screenshot of this to send to the customer, that's obviously going to confuse them. So you'll need to toggle it off and on depending on what you're doing, just to keep that in mind. So that's one way to set up the workspace. I'm going to hit F4, center everything. So you can do it that way, right? And so I can, again, depending on, I'll change the color so it's a little easier to see. So this is a guide for me to know this is going to get cut off. Now a lot of printers will want you to do that same gap to the edge of where your actual text is. And the idea is they call it like a safe zone, I've seen it called. And so the idea is when they're printing it, the card might sit left or right when it's getting cut. And so if you have some text, for example, that goes right up to this edge, because you're trying to be, trying to use that, maximize your space. So you're saying, well, the card's only going to get cut here, so this should be fine. And technically, from a design on a computer in your office, that's true. But when this card gets sent through the printer and cut, it can shift slightly left or right, up or down. And so this can get cut into. And so printers might want you to have a safe zone as well. And so what you can do, and what I'm going to do here is make this so it's editable. And you can either duplicate this and have both, or you can simply click and drag this in a little bit. And that gives you at least a bit more of a gap, and then I can relock it. So that's one way you can kind of handle it. So your design still goes to the edge. Anytime you do a color, let's say, well, this go all the way to the edge here, and let's say we're going to do some kind of ellipse or thing down here at the bottom, this kind of deal, right? So I do this, right click, get rid of that border, and then I want to power clip that in. This is just a quick example. So F4, and so the idea is that the design goes to the edge, but I keep all my text in this area here. So anything that I have goes to here, and this is the extra bit that will get cut off. And again, it's going to get cut off here, but based on how much it might float, you're safe that way. Okay, so that's again a way to set up some things. So I'm going to extract everything out of here. I don't want this, and this is a non-power clip frame. So the other option, so I'm going to take this off of edit mode. I'm going to click and delete that. The other option is to simply use guidelines, and again, I'll show you both, and then you can decide what you want to do. And so what I'm doing is I'm clicking in this ruler area and dragging. Now this is an option here. So if you're not able to do that, it could be that you have the show guidelines already checked. And then I can drag this down like that. And so the idea is that these guidelines, which are here, are not printed. They're visible. And so the same things apply. If I take my design upper bar, put it there, right? So I just see these and know that that's where my text is going to go. So that's kind of how you can set it up. Now, I personally don't like this method simply because it's easy to move these or delete them or get them in the way. The other option, of course, is to create a set of, again, layers like this and have that set up. Now, once you've done this a few hundred times, you get a feel for it. And so I already know, generally speaking, to leave a gap in this area because I've done so many business cards. So that's kind of the setup options for the guidelines. Keep that in mind. You can use them, don't use them, but check with your printer on what your overall dimensions need to be. Is it, a little bit, or is it a lot? Now, if you're doing a rounded corner card for a client, it's very possible that these need to be even bigger. Something like 3.825 and 2.325, for example, and you can see how much larger that is. And the idea, it's the same thing, right? The card is going to be printed, it's going to be cut down, and then the rounded corners as well. So where you design it is still going to be square to the edge, but the final design will be cut rounded. Now, I don't take the time to make my box rounded because then I'd have to have a second one. Now, you may want to do that if you're trying to be fancy with the customer. So this is your total design size. I'm going to actually type this in, 3.825, and then 2.325, hit P to center it. And so this is my file that's going to be submitted to my printer. Now, I may decide to take a copy of that, Control D, and do something like 3.5 and 2, hit P to center that. so we can see it, I'm gonna right click and make it a little darker. And then I'm going to click this shape tool, which has rounded corner, and I'm gonna zoom in so you can see it. I'm gonna click and drag to show the radius. So you could do that. I'm gonna lower that down. So that you send this to your customer, but you have to remember two things. One, don't send that to the printer, and then two, your design still has to go all the way to the edge. So it'll end up causing you to do a little more work, but again, if you're trying to make a fancier presentation, you can do it. So I could take this, for example, power clip it into this, and then I could take a screenshot of the rounded corner, and that looks better. It's more impressive. You just have to remember that if you're gonna, when you do that, you need to pull it out of there. I'm gonna do Control Z, just pull it out that way, so that, and then get rid of this, and this is what you actually save and send to the printer. They will cut it down, and they will cut the radius in it after it's printed. Does that make sense? So that's the basics of setting up your workspace for a business card. I'm doing a series of videos on how to create a business card, a basic card, an advanced card, and probably 2 or 3 others, depending on what my viewers want to see. If there's something you want to see specifically, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, talk to you later.